Hello and welcome everyone. My name is Kelly LaChance and I work with Tribal Tech LLC. Thank you for joining us today for the Native Language Panel Series 3 webinar, Teaching Our Heritage Methods for Native Language Revitalization. To start us off in a good way today with this very important work that is being done in our communities, we will have Braxton Red Eagle say a prayer and words of gratitude for us. Thank you, Braxton.
Thank you. First, I'll just say I appreciate you inviting me to be a part of this and asking me to start us off with the blessing here. So I'll just go ahead and jump right into it. Indatsi wakanda wakanda ijinke awatatse apata nagat kanshio wiki gasenxte witsiko ming she don't bring she got konwenong gadapio le konse midota lista wenong gadapio indatsi le kon kiliskitse Iedutse kan kiki ta wadaki stompa pita dak wadaki pikombra. Hampakizani awashkaji hakons konstelaashita ekontakha. Hampa doina hank shogashenke washkaha pikombra. Iegashena. Amen.
Thank you so much, Braxton. We really appreciate that. And I just want to make sure that folks can hear us okay. If you cannot hear us, just please let us know. So moving forward. So today's webinar is presented by the Office of Indian Economic Development, and it is in collaboration with the Bureau of Indian Education. And we would like to thank the Bureau of Indian Education for your contributions for today's webinar. We have some housekeeping items to go over. The webinar, of course, will be recorded. Everyone will stay muted during the presentation. Please enter your questions into the chat to be answered during the Q&A time. The slides and the recording will be made available to participants and will be sent out via email. A survey link will be posted during the webinar today, and we would appreciate you completing that before you leave today. Thank you so much. At this time, I will turn this over to Jim.
Good morning, good afternoon. I hope folks can hear me. My name is Jim Henry, and I'm the acting chief for the Division of Economic Development. Welcome, everyone. I wanted to let you know that our director is Anna LeBeau, and she's from the Omaha Tribe of Nebraska, and our chief, Denise Litz, is actually on detail for a while, but she will be returning. Next slide, please. The Office of Economic Development is broken out into two teams. We have the Economic Development Specialist team, and we have the Grants Management team. Grants Management team deals with all the grant stuff. They issue the awards, answer questions about the grants, do extensions for grants, etc. The Office of Economic Development Specialist conducts outreach with tribes, webinars on different activities that are going on, and developing resources or identifying resources to help tribes with their economic development. And next slide. So I'm going to introduce the next presenter. It's Dr. Timothy Begay, and he is with the Bureau of Indian Education. And take it over, Timothy.
Good morning, good afternoon, everyone. Yate Hasil Adin Taisatsan Considaje Tedeskizin Ye Natrachini Basichin Nakaden Dashit is a land national. Settle down in Holia Adi Nasha. That's a little bit about me and my in my language. I'm currently an education program specialist with the Bureau of Indian Ed. My office is down in Albuquerque, and I work with about 96 tribal schools, tribal control schools. These are grant and contract schools throughout the country, and I'm currently over here at SIPI as the Vice President of Academic Affairs. So I have two hats currently I'm wearing. But for this webinar, I wanted to just acknowledge that my friend Francis, he's the panelist here. I just want to acknowledge that we're on his country and his land. We're local nearby with all the other pueblos as well. So that we are thankful and grateful that we operate on his country and his land today. So, but let me, if you can go to the next slide. Okay, there you go. This conversation in this webinar is a series, largely because we started this conversation a while back about looking at language situations in our schools. What is going on? Is it being taught? Are students learning? And what are some of the challenges that our teachers and tribal leaders facing when it comes to language and language education, language acquisition? And so what we come to find is that, yes, our language is, depending on how you look at it, our language is being lost. Language is shifting. Language is changing for all of us. And so depending on what perspective you take, that's how you're going to look at it. And that's the reason why we began this conversation. We started off the first webinar by looking at, so what are some of the language issues out there? And what we learned there is that there's the issue of language speakers in some communities. The language speakers are no longer there. They have passed on. Some places they have hardly a curriculum that they can offer to their students. Some on the other end of that spectrum is there are some tribes fully practicing their language, and students are learning, and a curriculum is established, and they have certification to teach in these schools. And so knowing that, and now we've learned all of that, we're starting to now, in this webinar, what we wanted to do was delve a little bit deeper into what is there and whether students are learning. And that's why we have these panelists. These people have expertise, and this sentence up here in front of us, everyone is like, where does that balance between teaching your language, native language, in the oral version versus the written version of it? And so how is that balance happening? And again, the question is, are students learning? What's the best way that they learn? Is it through a verbal oral interaction, or is it through written approaches? And so these are some of the questions that come to our mind as we sponsor these webinars. So, and we brought some experts to talk about this. And so we'll ask them some questions, and at the end, we'll open it up to the audience. If you have questions, please put it in chat, and we'll try to pull it out. And we have 4 panelists and only an hour and a half. I know that's not a lot of time. So we will do our best to stick to the time and try to get everybody a voice and questions heard. So Kelly, go ahead. Next slide. Yeah.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Begay. At this time, we would like to welcome our panel speakers and thank them for taking the time to be with us today out of their busy schedule. The panel represents a diversity of immersion and language programs, and we are so excited to have this representation for you all to learn more about other immersion programs and what they're doing, and also learn some ideas that may be helpful in the areas that you're working in. We would like to present Braxton Red Eagle, the director of the Osage language program from the Osage Nation, Tia Corti, Yvonne Flynn, and Francis Beagle. And each one of our panelists will have the opportunity to introduce themselves as well as they go into their presentations. And then After their presentations, we'll go into the panelist questions where you're going to have the opportunity to also ask them some questions that may come up during their presentations or during the panelist questions. So we want to thank them again, and we're excited to have them here and the different programs that they represent. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to get started with Braxton Readyville.
Okay, I'll try to do this as quickly as possible for the sake of time here so we can get to Q&A a little faster. My name is Braxton Readyville. I'm director of the Osage Nation Language Department. I'm also on the Quapaw Culture Committee, as well as the Puska Public Schools Board of Education. I'm a community member here in Puska, Oklahoma, right in the middle of the Osage Reservation. I have a wife and 3 kids I live with here, and this is kind of who I am. As far as our program goes, there's kind of 3 different things here on this first slide that kind of signify what we do as a program. On this left side, we have teaching certificates that we have language classes in Osage 1 and in Osage 2, both levels in the high schools here locally. We got 5 different high schools where we're in. In order to be in those schools, our curriculum through the State Department of Education has been certified as a world language credit, which means that they can take that for that credit instead of taking Spanish or French or whatever that school might offer. In order to teach in those environments, the teachers have to be certified through the State Department of Education as well as through the Osage Nation Language Department. Right now, all of our certified teachers are full-time employees of the Language Department. That relationship works out well because they're our employees, so they're paid by the Osage Nation, and the teaching materials and everything are under the control of the Language Department, and the school gets to look good by having that on the report card. They have the world language there. So it's a win-win in a lot of ways. It allows us to reach a lot of our students. Puska Public Schools, I think the last I knew was a vast majority Osage Nation students, even though it's a public school. So that's one thing we do is we're in the high school with high school classes. In the middle, there's 2 different entities that the tribe runs that are our educational programs. The Posca and Kotapi, that's the tribally ran school. They're a private certified school, and they have grades right now up to 7th grade, but they're adding on grades each year in order to get to a full high school. So we have that school that is completely under our control. The younger school and the younger kids there, we have our teachers from the language department staff that go into that classroom each day for just a little bit of time to help some of those teachers include language into their interactions with the children. The older kids, they have somebody on their staff who has been around language quite a bit. He's got a degree in linguistics. He's an Osage tribal member. He's in the community, and he works with the teachers up there. The other one, that red rocking horse, is our early learning academies. They're like our child care facilities. And I believe we have 4 different locations here in our land area. And they have younger kids there full time, and then they have some kids in the wraparound program that come there after school. And our staff works with their staff in order to help them get language situated too. And on the far right side, that's our community classes. We have right now 21 community classes that we offer throughout the week, and that's a majority of full-time staff as well as contract people in the community that help us teach those language classes. That's an old flyer there, but right now we stand at 21 throughout the week at different times. We have them typically during the noon hour so that people can do it on their lunch break. It used to be called Lunch with Language. We still kind of call it that, but a lot of people are logging in online. We've been able to do that way. So that's kind of the 3 things we do. I could spend an hour talking about any one of those, but I'll go ahead and move on to the next slide if that's okay. Another thing we're doing is we have a lot of different projects trying to incorporate technology. We talk about reaching kids, staying with current times. If you know anything about kids, if you want them to learn something, you got to put it on a screen, and they'll put that screen in front of their own face. So that's kind of one of the approaches that we've taken, is trying to get inside of those spaces. You always have to meet your students where they're at. If you want them to learn, you have to put it into their lives. It's hard to get them to do what you want them to do. So if you can meet them where they're at, that takes down that barrier. So one way we've done that is our writing system has went into Unicode, and it's been on various devices and platforms. As you can see, you can text in it, you can make a Facebook post. I can get in Word, PowerPoint, and those kind of things. Working with Unicode, I've worked with W3, worked with Apple in order to get some of these things to work properly. And those are ongoing conversations, but we're still having those conversations to make it work. Also on here, the bottom screen is something we're working on now. It's been in the work for probably almost 2 years. It'll be about another year. It's a VR application. There's a lot to say with that. The thing I'm excited about is it's a learning management system. It's my teachers can put their curriculum into it, build lesson plans, take attendance, do all the thing you can do like on a Google Classroom or a Canvas behind the scenes, and then you can launch it into a VR space. It also works on desktop. So that's one thing we're doing. We also have in the top right corner, that's an AR. So that app has that particular story in it, and you can scan the physical copy of the book. It turns into a pop-up book. It reads it to you in English and in the Osage language. That story in particular is a story that traditionally has been used to teach language. It doesn't exist because of language, but it's been used in that format. So what we did is we took that and we kind of merged traditions with our new vision in the younger generations by making it technology, or integrating into technology that's current. Bottom right is a version of one of the apps that was put out. We have a couple different ones. That book up there is actually in our books app that was created, and that's the first book in it. We're creating more books right now to put in there as well. Some are going to have that same feature as that story there. Some are just going to be the book only. Okay, I think I have one more slide maybe. Sorry, I'm trying to go as quickly as I can. The other thing is we want the language to be public facing, obviously. So we want you, anywhere you're in our spaces, that you're going to see our language. Obviously, we want you to hear the language too, but if you're driving around town, there's not going to be somebody you're interacting with, or, anywhere you go. So talk about this balance between reading and seeing the languages versus hearing it and learning it orally. The answer is, you got to do everything you can, and people learn different ways, and so it's just a way to reinforce that our language is here. We are teaching it. You're going to see it. You're gonna have all the opportunities you can to learn it in some fashion. So it's not like we're putting it out there for you to learn by reading, but we definitely want that to be an opportunity to reinforce the language. So we have it in all these public places. Okay. Maybe one more slide then. Usually I get asked to touch on this, so I thought I would do it very briefly, although I don't care to really talk too much about it. Recently, we were involved with Killers of the Flower Moon movie. That's about one of the darkest periods in our history. I'm not going to go into the storyline too much, other than to say the written language and the spoken language were both included in the movie. On the title right there, you can see that was on all this. I went and seen the movie a couple of times at different premieres, and that's always been on the screening. It's been on promotional materials. So we've had our written language blasted out by the people at Apple just through the movie. And then also in the movie, some of the scenes are done in our language as well. And that was in conjunction with the language department here. So they came in and they did all these things trying to involve the community, involve the Osage Nation, but the language was the authority. The language department was the authority on the language for the movie. Okay, and I think that's all. Thank you.
Thank you, Braxton. We appreciate that so much. Thank you for sharing everything with us. So right now, we'll move forward with Tia.
Aloha and good morning. My name is Tia Curdy, and I am the principal at Kekula Ni'ihau Kekaha Learning Center, which is a pre-K-12 Ni'ihau language public charter school on the island of Kauai, in Hawaii, if you all are familiar with Hawaii. Our mission since inception has been to strengthen and perpetuate the Ni'ihau dialect of Hawaiian. We are a pre-K-12 school, and we average about 65 students per year. So we're a really small school, and with a very specific mission to strengthen and perpetuate the Ni'ihau dialect of Hawaiian, which is a minority within the Hawaiian minority to begin with. The school was established in 2001 and as a public charter school. And in 2014, I transitioned from being a teacher here to into the principal role. And in about 2016, I as a leader, as the new and young leader of the school, I felt like we needed to kind of reconvene as a community, as a school community, to go over some agreements and definitions, because in 2016, the school itself had been operating for 15 years. So there were, old families that were a part of the school since inception, and then there were families that were new to the school, and depending who you talk to, there was different ideas of what the intent and the purpose of the school was, and basically the direction we were headed in. So in 2016, we coordinated a school-wide retreat, and our intent was to hear from all of our stakeholders in what their idea or of the intent of the school was, and what we wanted for the future. And it was we agreed on a lot of things. There was disagreement on some things, but the unanimous message that was communicated at this retreat was that the Ni'ihau language needs to be prioritized 100% of the time. So with that, I began to get to work, and the first thing that I realized, I was a teacher here, but I did not, prior to that, but I was not teaching our language. We are immersion and also bilingual immersion school. So I was teaching the middle school, and my kuleana, or my teaching line, was really to transition students from our Ni'ihau language program into the English language program. So kind of bridging that for students in the middle school. So I wasn't directly responsible for the Ni'ihau language curriculum or part of the curriculum. So when I transitioned into the principal role, it was a really big eye-opener for me to realize that our Ni'ihau language program and curriculum was really non-existent. It was based on each teacher, because we do have native language teachers in our across the school, but more so instruction is delivered in our native language in the preschool grades through 5th grade. And then we transition from 6th through 12th grade into bilingual learners. And so I was very surprised that our curriculum was dependent on each individual teacher. So by the summer of 2017, the upper left picture here, Kealapito, was developed by the native language staff at our school. I had attended a summer training and realized that we didn't even have a foundation for our language prior to a written foundation of our language prior to 2016. So the English language has the ABCs. There are other Hawaiian language users and speakers who use 2 different foundations. Well, I had realized in 2016 that we did not have a Ni'ihau language foundation. So Kealapito was born. It's a syllabary foundational system. So we have 45 pana, or syllabary clusters that we use now to teach our language. In that phase, you know, between 2016 and I say 2018, we did go through a lot of agreements and defining, because we needed to know and be solid on the program that we were going to deliver. And it was very important for me to get agreements from our school community. Now, all of this work that we've been able to complete, I guess I need to just make known, has really just been within my school, within the boundaries of the school. These conversations have not taken place outside of the school in the greater community just yet. But we haven't had someone in our community that's been willing to take on that charge. I can control the boundaries of our school. And so that's where I started, and that's where I've kind of stuck to. It's now been 10 years since I've become the Po'otumua principal here at the school. So, you know, experience has taught me a lot. And who knows, I maybe in the future, it's something that I take on, you know, moving forward. However, so going back to Kealapito, once Kealapito was developed, it really propelled the project and the work forward, because now we were able to build off of that. The students so we've been in the last 6 or 7 years developing curriculum. Also, prior to 2016, there were no published resources in our language. It was passed down orally prior to that. And so building the Kealapito Foundation was really critical in being able to then develop written materials. Today, we have over 500 published books. We're now working and resources, and then we're now working on building out actual curriculum. So one of the things that is really important within this project and work is also celebrating students. So each time students publish a book, which is annually, so each student in the school publishes a book annually, and then we celebrate them. So that's the upper right picture is a picture of our first celebration, actually back in 2018, in January of 2018, when we did our first authors reading and celebration of, you know, having published Ni'ihau language text. So that's kind of the short version of the work that we do here in regards to maintaining our language here through the school.
Oh, thank you, Tia. That was so interesting, the development, how you went from the oral to the written and the development of the curriculum. Thank you so much. I know a lot of the communities are still working in those areas, so it's so helpful. Thank you.
You're welcome.
So next up, we have Yvonne.
Yagalidu, Yvonne Shiiji Kilan, Danina Aslanchida. Hello everyone, my name is Yvonne Flynn, and I am Danaina Athabaskan from Kenai, Alaska. And just a quick overview of where I work and who the people I work with. I work with the Danaina Language Institute as a Danaina language coach. And within this picture right here is everybody in our department with our families during the busy fishing summertime down here on the Kenai River. Within our department, we base a lot of our activities in the summertime as family oriented, because we believe that language and culture is a family activity that needs to be done. Next slide, please. And within our department, our major projects that we are working on right now is developing teachers, as we have a significant imbalance of first language speakers compared to people wanting to learn the language. So within that, we are building teachers that will help us be able to bring the language out more. And so within this teacher training immersion, we have immersion, storytelling, written approaches such as literacy and morphology. And so within these, we have pictures right here in the center middle. Up here, we have shown our literacy packets, which shows each letter of our language is worked on throughout the whole week, and it emphasizes that letter. And then on the top left, we have shown how our teacher manuals are laid out for our immersion lessons. And on the bottom, all three of those pictures show how our morphology and language is set up through color coordination, and a beautiful cover picture of what our immersion teacher handbooks look like as of now. Next slide, please. And also within these, we also emphasize on teaching the cultural side of the language and not just written or oral. We also want to go hand in hand with the task-based learning as well with our teachers. And yeah, so this is our teacher group as of right now. We have 4 students with 2 teachers, and I come in when I can and help as well. And this is our program. Chinon.
Thank you, Yvonne. That was so interesting. As interesting aspects as well. I know for me and probably other folks is like how you identified imbalances within your teacher and the steps that you took pedagogically to work on that. So thank you so much. So next up we have Francis.
Kotihopa, my name is Francis Vio. I am from the Pueblo of Zia. I'm also Jemez Pueblo and Hickory Apache, which are all tribes here in New Mexico. And I just want to say greetings to everybody. And I see a couple of people in the chat that I know from the Pueblos and spaces here in New Mexico. So greetings to my friends and family here. I just wanted to start up by giving a little bit of background first, because I am not representing a tribe per se. So I don't want, as I'm going through, I'm not going to be speaking on behalf of a particular tribe or nation. Even though I'm enrolled in this Pueblo of Zia, but I'm definitely not speaking on their behalf. But I am going to be giving the Pueblo perspective in general, given my experiences with the different Pueblo nations here in New Mexico, and kind of give that vantage point. So there are 19 Pueblos here in New Mexico that all have very distinct cultures and communities, and there are different languages included within those. So I'm going to try my best to really consolidate all of that, but more importantly, focus it in on my school district that I'm the Indian Education Director for, which is Bernalillo Public Schools. Bernalillo Public Schools is a majority Native American public school north of Albuquerque, in the centrally located in the Bernalillo, but we have schools in several different communities, 3 that are actually on Pueblo lands, and those are the ones that we do work with, and we do have relationships with it. So if you go to the next slide, I can add on to that. So we do serve 7 sovereign nations within our district. So we have all of the Pueblos listed there, which are all Pueblo communities. We do have other nations, Native American students within our public schools, but those are kind of spot. A vast majority of our students come from the Pueblo of San Felipe and Santo Domingo, but we do have programs for those Pueblos. We have programs with. Native American language programs, and we have to work directly with those tribes in order to provide those language programs in our schools. And they have different setups based upon what those tribes have identified as needs and wants, and how they want to really implement their curriculum and their and utilize their teachers in that space. And so we're very diligent in being having those lines of communication open with those individual tribes, and we're always open to new Native American language programs within Bernalillo Public Schools. Next slide, please. So our native language programs, and so like I said, there's four of the pueblos that were listed in the previous slide that we have Native American language programs with, and they're all very different. And they're all really working on different areas. So we try and meet them where they're at from that sense of fidelity to each of those tribes, but also the equity that we need to engage in with each of those tribes. It is a little bit of a tedious task in order to get these things done, but it also really connects back to the communities, the tribal wants and the needs, and really engaging in that government to government relationship with these tribes, and looking at how are we engaging with them, what are those lines of communication, how are we providing opportunities, how are we supporting their native language programs. And so one of the big things right now that we're working on with the Bernalillo Public Schools is working on a cultural competency framework. And the cultural competency framework is really centered not necessarily around language, but really building understanding of what our pueblos are like. Who are we? What is the history? What are you coming into this district? Because our district is 52%, which is about 1,700 Native American students in our district. And looking at all of those kids, are those 1,700 kids are coming from 7 distinctly different communities and languages and dialects that they're coming from. So we really want to make sure that we're supporting our teachers and engaging those students in those communities and looking at norms and values for them, but also giving the students and the communities and families the opportunities to build those language programs and allow us to be a part of that. So I'm very thankful to the pueblos that we do work with in providing those services, but also look forward to making those more robust as we go forward. And I'm going to cut myself off right there because I want to get to the questions. And there's my contact information if anybody wants it.
Wonderful. Thank you, Francis. That's amazing. The services that you offer with such diverse languages from within your school district, that's amazing. And it's an inspiration, I believe, for all of us. So thank you once again. At this time, I'm going to turn this over to Dr. Begay, where we'll move into our panelist questions.
Panelists, thank you. Can you guys hear me? Yeah. Oh, good. Panelists, thank you for your perspective. Everyone here, every panelist seems to be doing their own kind of work in unique ways. And so, but now we want to ask you some questions with given your expertise in many of these areas that you work in. The first question, we'll have 3 rounds of questions that I'll be asking. The first one is, in the spectrum of language revitalization efforts, some communities prioritize oral traditions over written forms, while others embrace written language as a crucial component. The question is, how have your respective communities navigated this balance between oral and written forms, or both? And what insights can you share regarding the impact on language immersion programs? And we'll go in the same order that we started, and we'll go in that same order with who's the first one here? Braxton. Yeah, go ahead.
Braxton.
Well, it's kind of a lot of ground to cover. A pretty jam-packed question there. I'll say in our situation in particular, we did form our own writing system. And so, you could say that the majority of our classes kind of start with learning the writing system, but it's not so much learn how we write things as much as it is these capture the sounds of our language. And so it's a way to engage people with the pronunciation and with the way to form different sound and sound combinations. And in the Osage language, there's also it's highly inflected, and so you have all these little morphemes that are your affixes, particularly on verbs. And so the syllable in itself throughout the language can convey its own distinct meaning. And so you don't really have to get into a lot of words or strings in order to start learning certain kind of meanings. And so at the most basic sense, you could say that our writing system is a way to accomplish some of those things, just pronunciation and the sounds of the language. But I will say that it's kind of a mixed review, as anything is. Whenever you're learning language, learning is difficult, teaching is difficult, anything. But language is particularly difficult. So you're really going to see a wide variety of people being able to accept, any kind of teaching method. You might have something that works for a significant portion of people, but then you're going to have people that it's just terrible for. And so there's no real easy way to one size fit all where, we just sit here and learn a language in a particular way. Now, one part of that is if you're teaching common phrases or a particular area of the language, then yeah, teaching it without written anything is the best way to go for sure. Because if you're, like, for instance, if you're teaching prayers, or if you're teaching talking to your children, or you're teaching directly to younger children, then there's not really a need to have anything written, or at least those things function in a way where the written language doesn't even need to enter the space, so to speak, at all. So it really just depends on, well, another thing, I guess, before I get ahead of myself here, is that when our programs and our language workers, we always automatically assume that our job is to make everybody fluent in our communities, and that's our goal. How do we build that program that does that? But in my experience, most of the people that are coming to our programs aren't here to learn to speak fluently throughout everything. They're wanting it for a particular reason. They want to be able to stand up and make a speech, and that's kind of a very limited, narrow usage of the language. They're wanting to be able to stand up and say a prayer, or they want to perform a particular culture function with that language, or use it in a particular space. And so, I mean, it really just depends on the motivations of the person who's wanting to learn it. But that kind of gets into some of the other questions that I see coming down here, where well, how do you get people to move beyond that and say, hey, this is important. Why don't you try to think to do this for all aspects of your life? There's ways we can do that, and I'll wait till we get down there. But I would just say that we have embraced just about everything that we can get our hands on in order to teach this, and whether that be classes where we just do exercises and round robins or games, or trying to find creative interactive ways to introduce language, and then pair that with written and sometimes without. One of the things I guess I'll end on here for the sake of time is we have like a series of culture videos where we've got people in the community to talk about different kind of knowledge they have for different aspects of the culture, and we try to include language in those things too, and with the subtitles in our language. So we've taken various approaches and tried to find that balance by just doing as much of both as we can, I guess, is the best way to put it.
Thank you, Braxton. Very interesting perspective. Tia?
Myself. Okay. So prior to 2016, like I mentioned in my introduction, our language was passed down orally. There were no resources published in our language, even in the classrooms. Now, we had started as a public charter school officially in 2001. So for 15 years, teachers would handwrite things, or they may have written things. So by the time 2016 rolled around, or 2017, when I really embarked on intentionally taking our school community through this process, for us, written forms of our language was critical. In 2001, when the school started, there was 100%, 100% of the student population in 2001 were considered fluent speakers. In 2016, 39% of our students were considered fluent. So that's, there was a 60% decline in a period of 15 years. And that was with maintaining the oral, passing our language on orally. So there were two ways that we decided to do our written forms. Students, like I said, do annual publications, and each year we focus on different forms of writing. So, and writing in different genres. We've done everything from fiction to nonfiction, biographies, autobiographies, just so that we can also see and hear our language in different forms. This year, we're focusing on persuasive writing, being able, to pick a stance on a topic and defend themselves. And then there's also a second type of publication, written publication in what we call the legacy series. So also each year we write one legacy text. Our school, being as small as we are, we have, each classroom consists of 3 or more grade levels in a classroom. So our teachers need to basically have curriculum to address kindergarten, 1st grade, and 2nd grade, 3rd, 4th, and 5th, and so on. And that is really unique to our school. I've heard of, classrooms where there's 2 grade levels, but 3 is a really far stretch. So in our legacy production, we focus all of the legacy texts on Niihau values, our values, the cultural, our cultural practices and such. And then we level it. So there's a guided reader, and then there's 3 levels to that guided reader, so that I can give that set or that text to the teacher with a guided reader for he or she to read to the class in group circle time. But anyways, when they're doing independent work, then, the kindergarten student can have the kindergarten version of that book. And it doesn't have to be K1 or 2, it can be by proficiency at that point. So those are kind of the 2 big written forms that we have undertaken in the last 6 or so years. And the oral, and then the oral forms still remain. I heard Braxton mention, prayers and such, speeches, and all. We still practice those things, but because there were no written published materials prior to 2016, that's been the focus for now. And in order to ensure that our language is, perpetuated. There are also, again, going back to my point about agreements and definitions. So there's the Hawaiian language, and then there's our dialect, right? And in the rest of the state, and across our archipelago, the use of diacritical markings are used in written form. We have we made an agreement that we won't be using diacritical markings, because in the oral form, we know when a stop or inflection needs to be made, and so we try to maintain that in the written form as well. And then another big one was in our dialect, like my name, Tia. In other parts of Hawaii, it would be Kia with a K. So the use of the T sound is very specific to our dialect of Hawaiian. So, but prior to 2016, it was never written. Even native speakers would not write using the letter T. So that was a big agreement that we needed to make as a school, because in looking at the data, in 2016, having just 39% of our student population being considered fluent, it was very alarming. And we realized that it needed to be also written in the way we want them to speak now. And proficiency, the 39% I'm talking about was just oral. It wasn't even reading, writing, and the rest of the literacy components. But that data was just in regards to oral proficiency. So that's.
Thank you, Tia. Wow, interesting perspective. Next, Yvonne.
Yes, so within our teacher training program, we have found through trial and error a striking balance between needing both oral traditions and written language as well, because of, as I stated before, in our the significant imbalance of first language speakers compared to what we have now. We only have six first language speakers left. And so, but one of the great things about that is Dena'ina is one of the most documented languages in Alaska. So for our learners, a big part of what they need to learn is the written language as well. It helps with documentation, some standardization, and a wider access for everybody. And along with our oral traditions, it helps with direct communication, immersion, and cultural transmission. And within, excuse me, within oral language, with our practices, we have conversational activities, storytelling and interactive activities and exercises that we do with them, where it shows no written language at all, where it's everything of just hearing and speaking with each other. And within our writing, we have reading materials that we read aloud, writing exercises, and the use of technology, which is used. So within all of this, we try to create a holistic program for our teachers so that they have equal exposure to both oral traditions and written. And also with that, we are also able to strengthen our intergenerational bonds of the balance of the oral and written by having our first language speaker be, excuse me, who is more proficient in the oral traditions and language, whereas once we can get those recordings, we can have our younger generations learning more of our written traditions to make sure we have that documentation set in place to help preserve our language more in the future. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, Francis.
Thank you. I'm going to take a little bit of a different approach and kind of look at this from, I guess, more of a Pueblo-wide perspective. And I think taking a step back and looking at some from a Pueblo perspective, looking at, again, I'm not speaking for everybody, but want to make sure that I'm laying a foundation here, is that there's a bit of a privilege here with from the Pueblo side of things, in the sense that we have access to the lands that we've been inhabiting for thousands of years. We still have a lot of our culture intact. We have a lot of our spaces and places that we've connected to spiritually for thousands of years. And so that part of it is an important aspect to when you start to talk about and think about the oral language of the tradition, because all of the 7 pueblos that are within Bernalillo Public Schools school district are all oral languages only. There are no written languages in any single one of those 7. There might be degrees where people might put things, spell things out, but for the most part, by and large, they're all oral. And part of that is, when we look at that, it really goes back to the epistemology within the Pueblos, and that way of passing knowledge, the way of doing, the way of knowing, how we pass that knowledge from generation to generation, which is largely experiential, but also intergenerational. It encourages that sense of community, those sense of interactions, that sense of passing that knowledge directly down. And it's also based upon a lot of seasonal pieces. There's a lot of things that are tied to our spiritual spaces and places. So that language is more than just a communication tool. It's a connection point spiritually for us that we really start to utilize as a means to connect. And so there are a lot of conversations I know that happen within different pueblos that here in New Mexico about whether they should write it or they should be just stick to oral. And I think for the most part, by and large, there's a lot of want to continue to keep that in an oral place and not add on that written language piece, which adds on another layer of how do we provide supports and how do we provide those opportunities for language learning to engage families, to engage students. I know that we're going to talk about that here in the next couple of slides, but I wanted to make sure that when we started to talk about why the Pueblos don't have that oral language, the written language component and sticking to more of the oral, it is largely a tie to the community and those direct interactions within our communities and really passing that knowledge down from generation to generation and assuring that we're passing on those traditions and ways we've passed that knowledge since time immemorial.
Wow, thank you, Francis. So you've heard the different approaches, different ways in which language transmission has been prioritized. So we've talked about the oral, we've heard about the written forms and how sometimes both are embraced. But let's go on to the next question. If you can go to the next slide, please. So we have some ideas now about in which direction language learning happens, oral or written versions. The next question here is, what strategies can be employed to foster genuine interest and engagement among participants in language revitalization programs, such as encouraging them to enroll in classes and commit to learning? Okay. Braxton?
Yeah, so it's like anything, it's about making it meaningful or useful to the people that want to learn it. The people that are involved, the people that are already in spaces where it's being used or needs to be known, they already have the incentive. They're always going to feel that obligation. They're going to feel that connection. They're going to have the opportunity to be in those spaces. And so those aren't necessarily the people that you got to get on board. It's we're talking about the people that might be interested, but for whatever reason, they're not taking it up. So usually in order to cross that boundary, like I said, it's about finding out what is it that they want from it? What is it that's useful? Even if they don't know that they need it, what's something that we could make available or put out that would catch their attention to say, oh, I do need to know that. And there's several different ways that you could do it. And some of the things that we're doing is outside of the purely cultural context is we're giving it some sort of social value, some sort of social capital. Well, if you want to understand what this thing is being said, I mean, if you language department posts a graphic or a meme, or we have people that are now having conversations and posting things online even, and people are seeing those and they think, well, I want to be a part of that. It gives them a tie to the community. It gives them a tie to a way to reconnect with some of the cultural things that they may not already be in contact with or not intimately in contact with. And so that's the number one thing, is trying to figure out the ways to make it to where they value it. And that sense of belonging has been one of the things that's really helped us, because we do have so many members that are not here in our community. They live all across the nation now, and we have, for historical reasons, big pockets of our people in places out in California or down in Texas that not still here with us in Oklahoma. And so those people are usually looking for a way to reconnect, and that's one of the big places where we can get people interested. So helping them reconnect with the culture through the language has been one of the ways it's been useful to us. So try to keep it brief again. Sorry.
Mhm. Thank you, Braxton. Tia?
Okay, so incentivizing, I mean, the biggest incentive for our program is each year when students publish a book, they're also gifted a copy of their book. And so for families that, you know, have chosen our school for their children, they're also building a nice library for themselves at home each year that their child, you know, publishes a book. This year in particular, we embarked on a more I don't know, innovative, I guess, or more creative way to fundraise, and in a way like branding. It's a school branding, right, that we started to create products or merch, we call them merch, that we're using a bunch of the imagery from our legacy text on actual merch items. We're putting our school name on them. So that's it. This is new for us. We don't really think about incentivizing per se, aside from receiving a copy of their book for now. And we are trying to use an online store. We embarked on an online store, which families are able to purchase a copy. Up until this year, we didn't allow sale of the books or any of the resources, but there has been you know, a growing interest over the years, and so I felt like we could try it out. So we're exploring that this year. So far so good. Like I said, we took some of the images from our legacy text that we had already published. We put them on a towel, put them on a shower curtain, those kinds of things, which has really helped to build the morale, but also to hopefully help to solidify and increase pride for our school and for our program.
Thank you, Tia. Yvonne?
Yes. So for us to help incentivize or inspire individuals to help with our language immersions classes, we create a supportive and inclusive learning environment by fostering safe and welcoming spaces where learners can feel comfortable about making their mistakes and experimenting with the language, and encouraging collaborations, peer support, and cultural activities that enhance the overall learning experience, as shown in my slides before, where we have the cultural activities that we try to do at least once a week within our language classes. Helps kind of relax the mood and have a more welcoming feel to language learning. And we also showcase practical benefits from language learning, such as communication with the community, increased job opportunities in the field that require language proficiency, and enhance cultural knowledge. And with that, we also partner with our local college that provides OCEs or OEC in Dena'ina language. And if you are wanting to be an instructor, there is a different program that we also have, which is a certification in Dena'ina language instruction. And we also incorporate innovative teaching methods such as using technology, multimedia resources, and interactive platforms for language learning to make them more engaging and enjoyable, such as online forums, mobile apps, and interactive games in person, and online games for review on their own as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Leon. Francis?
Yeah, so I would echo some of the things that was just mentioned in the previous slide or the previous presenter, by also saying that I think it's not necessarily incentivizing, but I think providing opportunity. And I really do appreciate her mentioning that inclusive learning environment. I think that's a huge part of this work, and being able to provide those spaces for families, communities, students, intergenerational opportunities to be able to learn with and from each other. I think the one thing that I would point out is from our district is there are some of our pueblos that require the language to their students to take the language at the particular schools that we're at, that they're in the district. There are other opportunities that are provided in the communities, extension opportunities. Those are varied from Pueblo to Pueblo and what those include. I also think that the one thing that is really important in stating all of and talking about all of this is really looking at making those the natural communication based and moving away from a lot of the Western approaches. And I think part of this movement within the Pueblos is also to be more community based and being intentional about that, and really moving the language and providing opportunities to have context for the language, instead of it being taught and relegated to only those four-walled room, to really extend those opportunities out. And this connects to my first answer, and really looking at how do we provide those epistemological opportunities, those ways of passing knowledge that are more natural for our native language teachers to be able to provide those out in context, in community, by doing things there, and really giving a community-based, a culture-based approach that's more community-oriented rather than it being relegated. So really looking outside of those walls. I think the other part is just like, I think going back to the building inclusive learning environments is understanding the different, from an equity standpoint, what are the impositions that are at play here? One of the big ones is the fact that we have a lot of our younger, intergenerational traumas have done a number to us, and a lot of language speakers in the communities have lost the ability to use the language, to speak in the language, because of boarding school, because of shame, because of all of these different impositions that have occurred, which has led to intergenerational loss of language. And so really addressing that in real time, that there's these things, these constructs that are valid and that they're there, but more importantly, that how do we reconnect, then build those bridges back so that our kids, our families can reconnect, especially our young parents. We have a lot of young parents in our school district, but we also have the other end of the spectrum where we have a lot of our grandparents that are raising their young people. And so how do we provide opportunities for that to happen? And that's where we really step in as a school district to try and help and provide those spaces and places for that to happen. In our district, we're really working with our tribes to provide those opportunities and extend the curriculum in and out into the communities rather than them being in a classroom. So I'll stop right there.
Wow, thank you, Francis. Wow, you can. What comes to mind for me is that you can bring a horse to water, but you can't make him drink. And so And so how do you provide that kind of environment for our children to relearn our language? That's the big question that we're facing here, that we're looking at. And next slide, please. And so when we're trying to create incentives or try to create an environment where we're showing that we value our language and culture, I think that's a start. And I see a lot of teachers out there educators doing that. And so, so what happens down the road, looking ahead, we see language loss happening in all cultures. And some have already lost their language their last language speaker will have passed away recently. Some are much stronger, but we're still facing this overall dilemma. What do we do about our language loss? What do we do? And so that comes the next question here. Regarding the future of language revitalization, what innovative strategies and approaches can be implemented to propel language revitalization forward, taking into consideration evolving technologies and changing societal dynamics? Okay, Braxton?
Well, we we pull on a lot of our community knowledge. Like I said, we have quite a lot of number of classes because we have so many community members that we can reach out to and get to work with us. Most of our community class, I think we'll keep adding, but a significant portion of them are just people from the community we know that have this love for language, and they have some of that knowledge, and all we're doing as a language department is essentially giving them a platform and helping drive students to them. Now, we also have our staff doing classes as well, but that's one of the things that we do is try to involve our community members as well to provide the knowledge that they can. As far as technology goes, we're about as deep in it as we can get. Like I said, we are trying to meet these younger generations. I grew up around old people, and so the difference in the way that I thought and interacted with the world, to me, didn't seem too far off between me and my father or me and my grandfather. But the way technology is advancing so rapidly and the world is changing, is that difference between me and my own son now is way farther off than that was between me and my parents and grandparents. And so you have things that kids growing up around cell phones and tablets and have this network of information all across the world that transfers instantly. And that's normal to them. They're going to have that from day one. And so the things that might seem normal or natural to me, the way of doing something, is disconnected from what they're going to think is normal and natural. So in order to make that language work in those spaces, you have to, and language inherently is it's in interactive spaces. Well, if those kids aren't interacting like me and my grandfather did, then that language is going to look different. So what we've done is we've really embraced the technology side of things. Like I said, we have our writing system, and it's in our technologies, and it's used on social media and texting, emails, all those kind of things. And then also the pandemic, which again, we could probably have a whole series on the pandemic and its effects alone, but that really pushed us into this Skype like we're doing now, or Teams, or whatever we're doing, this video conferencing. And so that really, in order for us to have our classes, we had to really take that on, and it's kind of just stuck now. So we have the majority of our classes are dual kind of classes. They're in person and offered online. And so that opens it up to a lot of different people as well. So that's about as concisely, I think, as I can put it. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Braxton. Tia?
So the future for us looks like, prioritizing cultural and language relevancy for us. So I think I heard not too long ago opportunities for us to get back onto the land, get back in our even our ocean, our shorelines. So the future at our school looks like focusing our curriculum and our projects around those types of things where students are interacting with you know, our native plants, animals, and special places that have helped to carry our people forward until today. And I forgot to mention, one of the biggest challenges we have is that our vision and our school is located on a different island from where our vision and mission is built upon. So we're on Kauai. Our vision and mission is rooted in the language and culture from the island of Niihau, where our ancestors are from. We don't actually have access to the island. So a large majority of our students have never been to Niihau. So that poses yet another level of complexity and challenges for us. But what I see in our future is to build off of the last 6 years, the successes of the last 6 years of building out our language curriculum, but more so transitioning to a Kai and Aina based, so a ocean and land based curriculum, and having sites, you know, working with cultural practitioners and kupuna or older people, you know, our grandparents that are still practicing our cultural and then our culture, and redefining this idea of itinaawa or knowledge. You know, because a lot of our teachers have been educated in you know, the mainstream DOE, and that's what they bring to the table sometimes. So it's redefining this idea of knowledge, and that, you know, all of our cultural practices are in fact valuable knowledge to teach our children, that we can learn reading, writing, and you know, reading and writing through a cultural practice, that we can learn science or math and this, that, and the other through a cultural practice that we see as something that we just do every day. But really our students today may or may not have the access to. And then trying to balance that with technology, right? The use of technology and what is the best and most appropriate way to use technology to meet the needs of our students in this day and age.
Thank you, Tia. Next, Yvonne.
Yes. So regarding the future of language revitalization, it requires a meaningful long-term goals and ensuring sustained efforts within our community, not just within our tribe, but everyone around. And within that, it's developing comprehensive language revitalization plans, which is collaborated with community members, language experts, educators, and tribal members to create a clear roadmap to language revitalization. Some of these plans we believe should have specific goal outlines, strategies, and milestones to be achieved over time. And when talking with tribal members, we determine and see what is needed and wanted from them. And just within just our language department as well, having strategic planning sessions and how we can help language revitalization go into the future. Some long-term goals that we have are language nests, establishing language nests and immersion programs. Starting them from an early age. Within these programs, they would learn the oral and written language traditions. Integrating language into our educational systems. As of right now, we work with our Yaganan, which is our school age program, cultural instructors. where they go into the schools and they teach culture and language within the schools. And we also have a Head Start program where we teach those teachers language and strategies and show them how they are able to use resources with their children as well. And going and partnering with our local college, as I said before, and about half of our department here at the Dena'ina Language Institute actually also works in the college to teach those university level classes. And utilizing technology for language preservation, such as leveraging technological advances to document, archive, and develop digital resources, mobile apps, and online platforms that facilitate language learning and cultural preservation. And within that, we have audio and video recordings, online accessible platforms such as SoundCloud, our website that you had seen on the chat. And our newest program is Can 8, with that being an interactive online teaching source. And by implementing these strategies and working together as a community, we can envision a future where native languages are preserved, promoted, and celebrated to ensure for generations to come. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Yvonne. Francis?
In regards to Bernalillo Public Schools in the district and the pueblos that are included in there, I think we're actually doing taking the opposite approach and really not necessarily looking at technology as our answer, but really looking at more, like I mentioned before, and some of the answers is really getting back to building systems and curriculum and engaging the instruction and the pedagogical approaches to be more aligned with and match with the communities and the cultures that are included within those communities themselves. And really going back to engaging those things that and ways of knowledge and the ways of passing knowledge that have been a part of our communities for since time immemorial. And so really norming that language, norming the fact that we, instead of using Western ways of knowing and learning, utilizing the ones that have been alive and have allowed our culture and our spirituality and our language and our customs and traditions to be passed for hundreds of years. And really engaging that, because what we've adopted and what public school systems have really plopped on top of us as these Westernized ways of doing things. And some of the work I did prior to coming to Bernalillo Public Schools as a consultant, but also working for BIE schools, one of the things as a cultural language history specialist was the use of a lot of these things that didn't. And I would ask some of these teachers, and even more so in our pueblos that I work with, why are you using these things that we never utilized in our communities prior to contact? And so one of the things the questions I always ask in my professional developments that I do with language teachers is I ask teachers to tell me a little bit about where they learned the language, and to cut to the chase. A lot of these, and I ask them to use their senses, use all, and to remember where they learned that. And one of the things that they come up with is these really insightful, really deep, really touching, really connected stories of how they learned from their grandma in this specific place, and that it smelled this way, and those sensories, that sensory component being engaged. That part of it is really what we really want to try and engage. I want you, I'm telling these Pueblo native language teachers is, we can rely and build upon, use curricular frameworks and all that stuff. That's great. But remember the pedagogical approaches, the instructional approaches, that the way that you were taught, the way that you were learned, because that's the most natural. That's going to connect you back to the learning. That's going to connect you back to people. That's going to connect you back to your community and the traditions and the spirituality that's embedded in that language. And so from the Pueblo standpoint, that's really what we why we take that approach. And so really it's not even necessarily in all of our programs, we're not looking to engage technology really, but more importantly, re-engage back into the community in the ways of that we've been doing things for hundreds of years. And so really looking at how we do that, re-engaging that and norming that, those spaces and places, because Western institutionalized education has done a number to us in a lot of ways, and we've adopted those things, but we also know that in a lot of ways they don't work. And so really looking at trying to re-engage the norm and norming those values and systems that we've had and embedding those in an education system. But of course, that's a challenge in and of itself, because we have a lot of people that don't know the history of Native education. They don't know the nuances of our communities. They don't know how to engage with or communicate with and build these systems with and for Native people. Rather, what it's been has been education done to us, not for us. And so really changing and shifting that narrative so that we can start to have our ways of knowing and learning defined by the Pueblos and those tribes of how we do those things and taking their lead. And so I think that's innovative in and of itself. And it's not really new, it's just the re-engagement of it and norming those things that we've lost and that we forgot of. And the way that we think about Western education has kind of just said, this is the way you're supposed to do it. So we're over there trying to align with standards, and we're trying to align and build curriculums that don't necessarily fit or are centered around things that don't belong in our community.
Wow, great, thank you, panelists. Wow, the great discussion. We can continue to talk about this all day long, talking about language loss, language shift, language changes. And we are out of time. We're going to be unable to have question and answer. We would certainly wanted to do that, but just in closing, let me just say again, thank you to you guys for joining us, and the others have joined us before, and that they're listening in probably. And we want to continue this discussion, and perhaps keep an ear out for perhaps this summer we can have a 1 or 2 days in-person conference where we can have these kinds of discussion and continue to build upon and develop strategies for how we can work together. So in closing, let me just say to you guys, thank you. And I'll turn it back over to Kelly for the closing comment.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, everyone. At this time, I will turn this over to Janelle.
Thanks, Kelly, and hello, everyone. On behalf of OIED, I would like to thank our diverse panel of experts and our audience for joining us today in our final webinar in this 3-part series on Native languages. I'd also like to recognize Timbege and the BIE for their continued collaboration in developing and delivering each webinar in this series. Thank you all. Enjoy the rest of your day.